You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 16th of October. Stamp prices may have to rise, Royal Mail boss admits. Teacher admits to blackmailing teenage girls and demanding sexual images from them. Prosecuting all child porn offenders in Britain would take 20 years. Migrants Tribunal at Roissy Airport. EU contains 3,600 criminal organisations. New Islamic Cultural Centre opens in Cork City. Almost 30 people injured and 380 arrests in Moscow following clashes between nationalists and police. Arab Spring to cost $800 billion, HSBC reports. Thought for the day, when is too much apparently not enough? And finally, Ooopsies, Premature Detonation. UK news. Stamp prices may have to rise, Royal Mail boss admits. The head of Royal Mail today has signalled that stamp prices are going up, just hours after the centuries-old postal operator saw its market value soar towards £5 billion in the city. Speaking as a Royal Mail officially listed on the stock exchange, Moya Green, chief executive, said that compared with other countries in the EU, its prices were low to middle of the spectrum. Asked by Sky News if that meant a price rise was imminent, she replied, "Well, we didn't raise price stamps last year." World at 8, so? Teacher admits to blackmailing teenage girls and demanding sexual images from them. A teacher who worked at a Dorset school has admitted blackmailing teenage girls and demanding sexual images from them. Zahid Akram, 37, entered guilty pleas to 4 charges of blackmail and 1 of causing or inciting a 13-year-old girl to take part in pornography. Exeter Crown Court heard Akram of Redditch, Worcestershire, use the internet to persuade girls to pose in their underwear. Akram threatened to expose the images unless the girls provided pictures that went certain steps further and pay for mobile phone top-ups, the court was told. The father of 2 even messaged one terrified victim the Christian names of her parents and threatened to show them the pictures if she didn't meet his demands. Judge Francis Gilbert QC, the recorder of Exeter, adjourned the case for pre-sentence reports, but told Akram he faced prison for the very nasty offences which took place in 2011 to 2012. These offences are very, very serious and they demand an immediate sentence of imprisonment, the judge said. World at 8. The judge left off deportation before prison term served. These guys do like 'em young, don't they? Prosecuting all child porn offences in Britain would take 20 years. Protection experts say 300 million images have been seized in 2 years. At the current rate, it would take until 2032 to prosecute the child sex predators currently operating in Britain. The toll of child porn offences is now so high it would take police and the courts nearly 20 years to prosecute even those currently operating in Britain, it was claimed yesterday. Child protection experts said the police have seized an estimated 300 million indecent images in just 2 years, which are increasingly extreme and involving younger and younger children. MPs heard that exploitation of children on social networking sites, including Facebook, has also seen a major rise, with many of the abusers operating from abroad and very difficult to track down. John Carr of the Children's Charities Coalition of Internet Safety revealed yesterday that at the current rate it would take until 2032 to prosecute the child sex predators currently operating in Britain. 5 police forces who replied to a request about how many images they had seized came to 26 million from April 2010 to 2012. World at 8. And these figures don't include the enthusiastic amateurs, the sex gangs or the sex grooming gangs either. European news. France. Migrants Tribunal at Roissy Airport. Illegal migrants arriving at the Roissy Airport in Paris will be judged there under new measures which become effective on Monday. The first tribunal for migrants came into force Monday close to the area where foreigners about to be expelled are detained. The court is a branch of the Tribunal of Meaux, which is about 30 kilometres from the airport. The small court should hold some 3,000 hearings a year, with the first taking place today. A unit of the Bobigny court should open later this year. The decision to open special tribunals for migrants close to Roissy's runways has been criticised in France. A number of associations, including the Human Rights League and the union representing the country's magistrates, have criticised an abnormal justice, as migrants will only be judged under the eyes of police officials. According to data recently published by the French press, over 29,000 foreigners were detained in migrants' holding centres in 2011. The same year, police stopped about 12,000 people at the border. World at 8. Far better for France and us if the figures had been reversed. 30,000 out and 12,000 detained. We all know they use France as a diving board to get to the UK. EU ratchets up border security. EUobserver.com. The EU is building up a team of heavily guarded men to help Libya stop unwanted migrants and to collect intelligence, reveals news website EU Observer days after at least 34 migrants drowned after reportedly setting sail to Europe from Libya. The EU Foreign Service underlined that the €30 million a year operation, which began in April and is named UBAM Libya, does not involve EU officials conducting patrols or searches. It is expected to have a total of 111 staff when fully operational next year. However, the large team of private security personnel who will protect EU staff in the unstable country will also transform UBAM's Tripoli HQ into an EU intelligence asset, as the website. It should provide high-quality security situation analysis and file security reports daily, weekly, monthly and 6-monthly to EU structures, reports EU Observer, quoting the call for tender documents. World at 8. This is probably a cover-up for a group to increase the number of Libyan migrants to Europe. Why should the EU concern itself with Libya? Surely the UN could prove useful for once. EU contains 3,600 criminal organisations, a report says. There are 3,600 active criminal organisations in the EU, while 888,000 people are being used as work slaves, a quarter of whom are sexually exploited, a CRIM report said. CRIM is the European Parliament's organised crime, corruption and money laundering body. Der Spiegel newspaper has revealed the contents of the report, which will go before the Strasbourg Assembly on October the 23rd. The report also says that criminal organisations are making over €25 billion a year from human trafficking alone. A World at 8 reporter comments, and the biggest one is in Brussels. Ireland, new Islamic cultural centre opens in Cork City. Dawah Centre has been warned by council last month on alleged use as place of worship. The owner of the new Islamic Cultural Centre on Shandon Street in Cork City, which was officially opened yesterday, has pledged to make the facility a vibrant part of the wider community. The Cork Dawah Centre hit the headlines last month when it emerged that the planning department at the local city council had issued a warning letter to owner Dr Fargal Radwan over how the building was being operated. The concern was that the building was allegedly being used outside specific opening hours and as a place of worship, rather than an information and cultural centre. World at 8. Well, of course it is. That's what Muslims build. Mosques by any other names that pass that council. What are these council men? Men of Kerry? Danes, we are too tolerant of Muslims. After numerous heated debates over whether Muslims are imposing their culture upon Denmark, a poll shows most think too many concessions are made for the minority. The public debates over banned Christmas trees, halal meat at schools and cashiers wearing headscarves appear to have made the Danish population more wary about giving their Muslim neighbours cultural concessions. According to a new survey by market researcher TNS Gallup, carried out for the Berlingske newspaper, every third non-Muslim Dane is under the impression that Denmark is too tolerant of its Muslim minority population. Jens Peter Frøyland Thomsen, a political science professor at Aarhus University, said that most surprising thing about the survey was how little the Danish mentality has shifted, even though the Muslim immigrants arrived years ago. The demands of assimilation weigh heavily on the Danish public, Thomsen told Berlingske. We have a very ethnocentric culture, and when people speak of integration in Denmark, they're really talking about assimilation. World news. Almost 30 people injured and 300 arrests in Moscow follow clashes between nationalists and police. Moscow is in a state of maximum alert for the risk of more ethnic riots, after at least 29 people were injured yesterday in clashes between ultra-nationalists who had gone on a real hunt for immigrants and police that moved in to stop vandalism in the city's southwestern suburb of Burilevo. The demonstration began as a protest against the murder of a 25-year-old ethnic Russian, allegedly by a man with non-Slavic traits, probably a native of Central Asia. The violence set off alarm bells in central Moscow, where the authorities closed the capital's Manezania Square under the walls of the Kremlin, where in the winter of 2010 a large gathering of nationalists and right-wing extremists resulted in the killing of Russian football fan Yegor Seridnov by an immigrant. Archpriest Veslavod Chaplin, chairman of the Synodal Department for Relations between Church and Society, said that the Church understands the indignation of the people. Hence he called on the authorities to mete out an exemplary punishment against immigrants who do not respect the rules of civil life, and urged minority communities to deliver themselves the perpetrators of such crimes before violence breaks out. Arab Spring to cost $800 billion, HSBC reports. The Arab Spring uprisings will end up costing Middle Eastern economies about $800 billion in lost output by the end of next year as countries struggle to restore stability, Daily Harayet reports, quoting an estimate by banking giant Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, or HSBC for short. In a research report, HSBC predicted that at the end of 2014, gross domestic product in the 7 hardest hit countries – Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon and Bahrain – would be 35% lower than it would have been if the 2011 uprisings had not happened. The combination of severe fiscal deterioration and a decline in government effectiveness, security and the rule of law will weigh heavily on policymakers' efforts, even to bring employment back to pre-revolution levels, it said. Girls threatened with hate crime charges for complaining about transgender bathroom harassment. School tells parents boys' rights as transgender trump their daughters' privacy rights. Female students at Florence High School in Colorado were threatened with hate crime charges when they complained about being harassed by a transgender boy in the girls' bathroom. Initial complaints about the transgender students' behaviour towards the girls were made by their parents, who were told by the school that the boys' transgender rights trumped the privacy rights of their daughters. When the female students continued to complain about the harassment, the school threatened to kick them off the athletic team or even hit them with hate crime charges if they didn't stay silent. The Pacific Justice Institute sent a letter to the school warning them against the prioritising transgender rights over the privacy rights of female students. We're not going to stand by and let 99.7% of our students lose their privacy and free speech rights just because 0.3% of the population are gender confused, the letter stated. The school so adamantly sided with the transgender student that officials even suggested the girls give up access to most of their restrooms altogether, reported CBN News. World at 8 states, bloody ridiculous and coming to an educational establishment near you. Thought for the day: when is too much apparently not enough? The British National Party has always been known for its common sense stance on immigration and immigrants, both legal and illegal. It isn't, as our enemies like to say, racist, it's just sensible. But nowadays, in the language of the far left, of course, being sensible is akin to being a racist neo-Nazi bigot. But this is an ethos that even our enemies are starting to think about. Even the most ignorant or pro-multicultural Brit can now see that the UK is full up. And even without the shutting of the stable doors after the horse has bolted, with the breeding capacities of all of our immigrant population, whether with our tribe or their own, the basic numbers of even the earlier immigrants from 40 years ago will reach epidemic proportions without the last 40 years inrush courtesy of the EU and our so-called independent ex-colonies. To make matters worse, we have our own British politicians encouraging more and more strangers into our country on the well-worn paraphrasing of encouraging world trade and tourism, vis-a-vis the Boris the Loris and Clegg the Beg manufacturing extra visas for the Chinese. Now who is to say that a goodly portion of them won't stay? The Chinese have always had a foothold in the illegal immigrant trade as it is. I used not to blame the immigrants for the state of our economy and public services, say 10 years ago, but now you would have to be stupid, desperate or deaf not to realise that the UK in particular doesn't need more people, whether they be brain surgeons or sweepers, old or young, black or white, married or single or with their clans. We don't want them anymore, and the sooner this message gets through to the politicians and their supporters, the better. For too long various politicians from the three main parties have relied on bringing in immigrants from their own preferred countries to vote for them, because like it or not it will be a rare immigrant who votes for the British National Party, although after this story things might be changing there. One of our organisers flies regularly back and forth from the Middle East and last week came into Heathrow as usual. His taxicab driver was an Indian and had a good old rant about the state of his host country. Apparently we are broken Britain and all our public services are going to hell in a hay basket, etc, etc. Of course everything that the BNP have been saying for years. Whereupon our guy took out a membership form and handed it to him. He recoiled in the only way that some people have when faced with our forms. "I couldn't do that," he said. "I couldn't be a nationalist." And our guy said, "Why not? You've just expounded all the views we have and want to carry out." That flummoxed him and by that time our guy had arrived home. My point is that although this Indian was criticising our country, he was in favour of stopping future immigrants who would take the bread of his mouth, not ours, which he has already in fact taken. So when you get older immigrants towing our party line, you know things are getting bad. We have 70 million people arriving a year in the UK. 1 out of every 3 of that total are not having their backgrounds checked because of EU protection rules, and the 1.2 billion electronic border system supposed to stop terrorists, foreign criminals and illegals getting into our country has descended into a shambles. Immigration Minister Mark Harper said, "We now take advanced passenger information from 78% of passengers travelling by plane from the EU and require 100% from those outside the EU. Oh right, is that why they built Terminal 5? So that all the foreign human traffic can still come into Terminals 3 and 4 without many people actually seeing them. And of course most of the staff in those terminals are ethnic themselves, so it really is jobs for the boys." I went to Terminal 4 25 years ago on a Sunday because that was when the flights came in from the Indian subcontinent, and even then the sheer number of passengers coming in was enormous, and believe me, they walked, they were carried, and many came in on wheelchairs, all ages, and none probably educated or trained in any way. They were the peasants of their societies, and these are the first comers of many of the communities that sprang up around those times, all hidden by the press of course during the late 80s. So what the ex-colonists started, the EU is already efficiently honing down and refining. The so-called misnamed European Union will not stop until it has a multicoloured, multi-ethnic and subdued European peoples, all paying their dues like robots, and the love of the individual and cultural histories of separate countries will be seen as opposing the EU dream state. One of the worst and most hypocritical exponents of the drive into Europe, as I call it, is Farage and his money-driven party UKIP. UKIP's EFD partners want new EU legislation to send unwanted people to us. Lorenzo Fontana MEP, on behalf of the EFD group, is calling on the European Commission to produce legislation to ensure an equal distribution among the 28 member states of immigrants arriving at the coasts of southern Europe and across the EU border with Turkey, in accordance with the principle of solidarity and burden sharing. Basically this means passing immigrants and refugees our way. So we are to have new EU legislation, the passing on of unwanted human beings and recognition of the solidarity of the EU, courtesy of the EFD. And who co-leads the EFD? Why, Nigel Farage, of course. Or to paraphrase the famous inscription on the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest-tossed, to me, and we will send them all to Kent." Cameron is busy bumbling around immigrants' benefits, but we all know, although the buzzing will reach even publication noises near the EU elections, that buzzing will die down, or if not become effective in the year 2050, when we could all be pointing our arses to Mecca 4 times a day anyway. Most of our doctors are from the third world and a third of our hospital consultants are trained overseas, and I for one don't decry these mainly worthy men or women, but many of them could take English lessons for a start. You try making a non-fluent English-speaking doctor or consultant actually understand what you're talking about, and it is uphill work. It is rather similar to a British English consultant or doctor trained in Britain taking a job at a hospital in Peking without speaking Mandarin or Cantonese. It wouldn't last very long out there, but we are expected as a people to kowtow in the UK. Many of our worthy and intelligent ministers are sticking to their guns over immigrant, and Norman Tebbit, for whom I have always had the greatest respect, is quite right in stating that immigrants are creating separate societies, as he told the Murnaghan programme on Sky News in late September. He further states, let's not jump to that conclusion about immigration. The bigger problem that is caused in our cities from immigrants of the third world who have no intention of integrating here. They are people who have left their country, came here and are trying to recreate their own country in our country. And he is right, and we know of what religion most of these immigrants are. Tebbit himself is easy on the Eastern European migrants, but they do form part of the same problem. Polish shops, Polish-speaking enclaves, Russian gangs, sex traffickers and workers, and it is the immigrant Europeans who appear to be taking the casual jobs that previously were open to young Brits and students. 6 out of 10 of you say immigration hurts Britain and fear the impact on jobs and services, and indeed you are quite right. Already there are signs that our public services from the sewers to the NHS are already suffering. But the greatest threat to our country and people is not just the amount of immigrants still arriving or their capacity to outbreed us, but what they might well bring in with them or cause to be imported into this country to accommodate their old lifestyles. And I'm talking about disease. Many diseases that we eradicated many years ago are back with us now, and all through massive and unchecked immigrant movement into the UK. We can now boast of TB, smallpox, polio and even leprosy in rising numbers. The human bringers of this are mainly from the sub-Saharan continent, India and Russia. Not to be left out are the Far Eastern Asians with their dog and cat meat, and the Chinese who import practically anything dead for us to eat. The last episode of Foot and Mouth was not incurred in World to Date or Thought for the Day, but by importing what is known as bushmeat into our capital city, mainly by new African migrants. This is meat from often endangered animals or even albino Africans themselves for muti, and can carry terrible diseases like Ebola or worse. Once this subset of diseases gets into any population, it spreads like wildfire, and if you can think for a moment of a heavily enriched and crowded area like London, I need not go any further. Suffice to say, it could be the end of days for Western civilization, but I doubt our government or politicians have thought of that one. Or if they have, it's sitting locked up in files never to see the light of day, as many immigrant children are sitting in various hospitals and will never see the light of their day either. We must come out of the EU, and the only way out is in effect from within, where at least we can have a say in certain rules and regulations that have and are affecting our way of life and living now. So don't ignore the EU elections and don't think they aren't important. They are. Make sure you have a say in Europe for as long as it takes for us to get out of Europe and the so-called Union. And finally, oops, premature detonation. 2 Somali suicide bombers who had planned to kill football fans during Ethiopia's World Cup qualifying match against Nigeria on Sunday blew themselves up accidentally before carrying out the attack, the Ethiopian government said on Monday. The explosion on Sunday happened in the upscale Boli district of the capital, about 3 miles from Addis Ababa Stadium, where thousands of fans were gathering for the match. They were Somali nationals and plotted to carry out a suicide attack disguised as fans on either the stadium or areas where large crowds gathered to watch the game, government spokesman Shimelis Kemal said. Explosives, arms, hand grenades and football shirts were found at the scene of the blast at a residential address about an hour before kick-off, he added. 3 suspects were detained. The Boli district has a small Somali refugee community. Heavy police presence must have caused their nervousness and state of agitation, which led to the detonation that caused their own death, said Kemal. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but Somalia's al-Shabaab Islamist rebels have vowed to exact revenge on Ethiopia for sending troops to Somalia to fight the al-Qaeda-linked militants alongside African Union forces from Uganda, Burundi and Kenya. Of course, if they fail to kill others while being killed in the service of Allah, they will be able to claim the promise of paradise that is given to those who kill and are killed for Allah. Quran 9:1-11. Yep, and that isn't a joke. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.